Hi, everybody. My name is Giulia Cespani. I'm a scientist and I'm one of the co-founder of Immigrant and International Women in Science Network. And today I'm very happy to be here moderating this panel entitled Generating a Roadmap of Strategies for Immigrant Women in STEM, Moving Forward to a Better Future. So before we go into the core of our presentation and discussion, I would like to go over how this panel will be organized. So first of all, we will have a short introduction of our panelists and also of the International and Immigrant Women in Science Network. And from now on, I will refer to it as IWS Network. Next, we will go over the survey results that the IWS network conducted during 2020-2021. And then we will ask some questions to the panelists, and this will be followed by a Q&A session where you will have the opportunity to ask some questions to our panelists, and you will be able to write the questions in the chat. If time will allow us, we will have also one activity for the audience. So first of all, I would like to introduce the panelists and thank you so much for being with us today. We have today Dr. Laleh Bejat, which is a professor at the University of Calgary, Dr. Sean McQuirk, which is a senior policy advisor at NSERC, and finally, the Senator Rosa Galvez. And I would like also to introduce you quickly to the IWS network, which is a nonprofit organization that was born a couple of years ago to build a collaborative environment for immigrant and international women in science, promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion in Canada. IWS is currently in 10 Canadian cities, and we have 30 leaders from 15 different nationalities and more than 500 members. By our second birthday, we were having more than 90 meetings and 20 public engagement events. Finally, IWS has different programs, including Voices Without Frontiers, A Light of the Month, and Science Fun Day. And during the pandemic period, during 2020-2021, IWS decided to conduct a survey to assess the challenges and barriers that immigrant women in STEM face daily during these unprecedented times of COVID-19. And this survey was organized in 45 questions divided in three main sections. The first section was demographics, then we asked about the Canadian job market, and finally we had some COVID-19 related questions. And a total of 273 people answered the survey. And we had very interesting response. First of all, we asked about the demographics and the provenience of these respondents. And our members comes from over 63 countries, and India with 29% was the most represented, followed by Brazil with 15%. We had other countries that were including Mexico, France, Italy, Iran, and others at about 5%. We also asked about the education level of our respondents, and while the degrees were very spread and different, we realized that most of our respondents all did a PhD. And despite the fact that we had very high qualified women, these women only less than 50% all did a job in their field of expertise, while most of them did not hold a job in their field of expertise or somewhat. We then ask also their satisfaction with the current job opportunities in Canada, and surprisingly, 63% stated that they were not satisfied with the Canadian job market, mainly because of underemployment, either by role or by salary. We also asked about their satisfaction with their current position, and again, most of them were not satisfied with their current role. mainly because of systemic problems in the job market. The last part of the survey assessed the COVID-19 impact, and 12% stated that they lost their job during the pandemic. 52% still have their job but worries about productivity. And finally, 65% consider their study negatively impacted by the pandemic. We also asked about the impact of the pandemic on employability, and 63% perceived an overall negative impact on employability, with 45% perceiving a decreased opportunity in the labor market, 10% perceived an increased competition, and 9% perceive a decreased networking opportunity. So now that we gave a short overview of the survey, we would like to use this as a starting point to ask questions to our panelists. And I will stop sharing my screen now. And I will go over the questions. The first question will be addressed to all our panelists. And we can start with Dr. McKirk, and then Dr. Laleh Bejat, and then Senator Galvez. So the first question, in the past few years, many Canadian institutions have made significant progress towards implementing EDI initiatives and programs that identify and eliminate systemic barriers that impede the career advancement, recruitment, and retention of underrepresented and disadvantaged groups. Despite this, one of the most important results from our survey highlights the respondents' dissatisfactions regarding their current professional activities. These results are confirmed by an array of evidence revealing that an enormous pool of highly skilled AWS talent is not able to find a STEM-related job in Canada. Can you give examples of successful EDI initiative and associated challenges you have implemented in your work ecosystem? And in your opinion, do these initiatives accommodate for immigrant women in particular?
Thank you, Julia. So I feel like I've been brought here not just for perspective on NSERC, but kind of the government of Canada in general. So, I'm not an expert on the government of Canada itself, so I can't speak to all the work that's being done, but I do know there is a lot of work that's been done to advance EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion in a number of ways to help build capacity internally to the public service, but also externally. So, for example, many in attendance will probably already know about programs like Dimensions at the federal granting agencies, which NSERC manages, which recognize multiple facets of diversity, including gender, immigration status, place of origin, parental responsibilities, lots of factors that were brought up in the survey. And all these factors need to be considered to achieve cultural change in the post-secondary sector. In my personal experience within NSERC and working across departments and agencies for the last few years, I've had the pleasure to work with a lot of immigrant women with STEM backgrounds, both more experienced public servants, but also newcomers fresh out of their PhD. And both their input and their leadership has in many ways contributed to the development of many sound policies and to the successful delivery of programs as well. And even on a personal level, have also helped me in many ways to provide better policy advice, which is part of my role. That said, there's still many barriers. One of the major ones being that federal hiring processes tend to favor candidates who are Canadian citizens. And in many cases, being fluent in both English and French is also preferred. So, all of this is fairly understandable to a point. And to my understanding, the processes towards citizenship in Canada is shorter and more straightforward than in some other countries. And the government does provide resources for second language training and also training for federal staff in general about EDI. But these nonetheless represent significant barriers to entry, and they can delay the career progression of many skilled and motivated people. I have other points that I can bring up about work with groups like Science Policy Exchange outside the government, but I'll save that for later and leave the space for other panelists to comment.
So I think I'm next. So yeah, thank you. So there is a lot of good initiatives such as Dimension that Sean mentioned, but also having positions such as provost, vice provost EDI, and also in every faculty and department now in the STEM related we can see associate deans, EDIs, and even at the department level. And this changes the policies that the university has. And so this helps changing the system we have and include more EDI. But the one I want to focus right now is more of a ground up initiative that has been happening in Schulich School of Engineering at the University of Calgary. A few years ago, we decided that there's a gap in the digital education, so programming and such, with the high school students coming to university. And we decided to sort of have a free program for students who could come to university and learn how to program using the mentorship from the undergraduate students. Now, this was a very successful program, but we were still sort of servicing a very privileged students who lived close to the university in a big city. Once the pandemic hit, we sort of decided to focus on places that didn't have any access to such programs easily, and because we had a chance of putting everything online. So the program is online. We actually have been offering it to some Indigenous communities. And right now we are thinking about beyond Calgary, beyond Canada, and thinking about how we can actually take this global to have all of those people who live in places where they don't have access, such as places like Afghanistan or Haiti, who might not have the infrastructure for such things, to be able to access these courses. And we are trying to think about the language barrier, how we can make sure that we get the mentorship that is culturally appropriate, but also having this forum open for students to be able to access. And I think these types of EDIs puts Canada in the map, both in terms of initiatives that apply sort of sound EDI principles to their programming. We do give EDI training to all of our mentors. We do have a sort of trying to have parity between men and women that come to the program, but also think about in a global scale and how we can be the leaders there. Thank you.
Can you please, Senator? I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, okay. So first I want to talk about Laval University, where I am still a full professor, and then about the Senate. So Laval University also adheres to the Canadian Dimensions EDI, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Charter, together with other 17 post-secondary institutions across Canada, aiming to foster increased research excellence, innovation, and creativity within the post-secondary sectors through greater equality, diversity, and inclusion. To advance this, Laval University created the EDI Institutional Committee and tried to positively influence the strategy and actions at the faculty levels and department levels, and they oversee actions and evaluate initiative. And Laval also offers training on EDI. However, you know that you're still put the data in your survey, and it's evident that there are dissatisfaction, there is underemployment, there are structural problems in the job market, and there is also problems with the certification of the credential of the studies of the diplomas. And so I conclude that as much as important it is to include these EDI strategies in every workplace, we must solve the issues. And for that, we have to first measure the problem, the extent, and then propose goals and actions, implement them, measure the results, and report these results. And if objectives are not attained, then we must restart again this cycle. At the level of the Senate, we have the Committee Internal Business of Administration of the Senate, and we have a subcommittee on diversity. In 2021, the Senate created an advisory group on diversity and inclusion to improve fairness, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace. I am happy to say that since 2015, the Senate, there is a much higher representation of women, visible minorities, and indigenous people. Yes, still I am the only one in STEM. I'm the only one scientist in the Senate. I'm the only one practicing engineer. So we are still far from the goals. But we did reach gender parity. So we know that there is progress, but we still have ways to go. So we have to create more opportunities, platforms where we can deliberate and talk about this among ourselves and propose new solutions. Senators have created a new working group on immigration, a platform for sharing of knowledge and advancing on ideas on immigration in Canada. So we discuss in this group diversity, certifications, immigration status, opportunities, and other topics related. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answers. This was very insightful. I would like now to move to the next question for Lale. So according to data from Statistics Canada, in the years 2019-2020, the University of Calgary had the highest percentage difference, 15%, in average salary between genders for full-time teaching staff in Canada. In your opinion, what are the root causes of this pay gap in academia? Do you feel that being an immigrant is an added factor to this inequality? And what can immigrant women do against wage differences?
Yeah, thank you. This is a very good question and very dear to my heart. And I'm really sorry to hear about this large percentage difference. I think University of Calgary is doing work on this, especially Melinda Smith, who's our Vice Provost EDI, has been thinking about the systemic changes. But let me tell you, what are the systemic problems? Well, generally, in the past few years, most of the department heads who do the hiring have been male, didn't have any training in EDI. When they have a women candidate, and especially even more so if it's a female from immigrant candidate, they offer lower prices. Now, as an immigrant myself coming to Canada, getting this offer was something that I could just sort of not believe, and you don't negotiate. And so you accept the same offer. So starting at the beginning, you start at a lower position than almost every male colleague that you start. Now it gets worse. So then you go on a mat leave. A lot of early career female faculty members can go on a mat leave. And then most probably, because they're earning less than their spouses, they would also take the parental leave. But during the mat leave and the parental leave, you don't get any raises. Even though everybody's salary goes up by a certain percentage, your salary stays the same. Not only you don't get any merits, but you don't get any extra. So if you start like 5% less, and then you get another 3% less, and if you have more than one child, like I did, you get every time this percentage adds up. So it's like having a reverse mortgage. So every year, everybody else makes money on that initial 5%, that 3% you take for your first maternity leave and so on. Now, this is not even considering the fact that you don't get also money put aside for your retirement and so on. But let's put those aside and just look at the salary. So what are the systemic problems? The way that the salary structure is built, it will always put in the people at the bottom to be kept at the bottom. So because of this difference, and because it is based on percentage, and because you don't get the raise that everybody else gets, even though there's inflation and every expenses are going up. So that's the first part of the systemic problem. The second part of the systemic problem is the way you are expected to go and ask for this change to be fixed. The university has, and this is across the board as far as I know, every university has everybody's salary. They also have everybody's performance. So they can look at these salaries and they can look at these performances and they can fix it. But it is expected upon the people who, most probably an immigrant woman who also has all these other microaggressions coming her way, to go and ask from their dean, from their department head, and go up and up to ask for salary adjustment. So even though the people in the power have all the knowledge, they put all the responsibility on the person. Now, if you have the courage to go and do that, and the answer is, you don't know all the data. So fortunately in Alberta, we do have the data. Or they say, you don't know all the details of this data. So, and when you ask for the data, they say, well, we can't give you the salary. So, and then they try to lowball you. It's not as if this system should be based on a justice or equitability or being equitable. It is based on how much can you negotiate. So again, putting the responsibility of changing and getting what you should be getting on the shoulders of the people who have the least amount of access to the power. And so this is, you ask, what is the systemic barriers? Now, being an immigrant definitely is a factor, but I think it is fortunately not the worst factor. I think the worst factor is the policies for compassionate care or childcare and mat leave and parental leave. And these are things that could be really, really easily done. And it will actually save the university a lot of money, or any organization. Because when you put things on percentage, always the people on the higher, scale make a lot more. And if you change that based on, you get this band for whatever you are, this amount of money per year or something like that, then it will actually, the gap will be starting to close.
Thank you for the answer. I would then ask the next question to Sean. Okay, so according to the 2021-2023 migration plan, Canada intends to welcome more than 400,000 new permanent residents every year. A portion of them will be constituted by international students that enrolled into a Canadian education program and then decided to remain in the country to contribute to its economy and future. As a senior policy advisor and active promoter of the engagement of the next generation scientists into science policy, we would like your opinion and perspective on the involvement and leverage of young, either newcomers or first-generation immigrant women in STEM in your activities and, in general, in science policy, how much their voices and needs are considered for the future decision of the country.
Thanks, Julia. That question about the inclusion of voices of immigrant women in STEM in decision-making really speaks to the heart of what the mandate of Science Policy Exchange is. And I mentioned I was going to come back to this, which is really threefold. One being to support and build capacity for the next generation of leaders in science policy, to produce and to disseminate resources for and from the next generation. But then to engage stakeholders and right holders across sectors to amplify and promote the inclusion of those voices. So the strategic plan of SPE, which should be coming out really any time now, includes that clear pillar on promoting and upholding not just EDI, but also accessibility, so within the organization, across all the events, deliverables that it produces, but also in the science policy landscape more generally. I won't go into that in too much detail. There's another panel next Friday that I'll be participating in, where I'll provide more detail on that. But I've had quite a few discussions with immigrant women scientists within SPE, but also from people reaching out to me individually through LinkedIn or mutual contacts about how they can plan and apply for careers in policy. And it's absolutely clear to me that there's a need that's not being sufficiently addressed here. One of the major issues being that the path from STEM studies into science policy and a career in science policy is not at all linear. There's some institutional initiatives, career symposia, workshops, these kinds of things that can be very helpful. There's programs like the MyTax Canadian Science Policy Fellowship, which allows a small number of PhD graduates to get into a science policy career, and that is open to immigrant international women. But for the most part, bridging into science policy into an actual policy role is all about volunteering, networking, and showing initiative outside of a STEM degree. And there's a short study that was done by the Scientific Citizenship Initiative at Harvard, where they looked at US STEM PhD holders and the skills that they use in science policy jobs. And really, other than discipline-specific knowledge, data analysis, and problem solving, every other skill that they monitored was developed in an extracurricular setting. And I think that's why there's a lot of students, including international women, that volunteer with SPE and other science policy organizations that are led by the Next Gen, because they provide a platform where they can exchange ideas and perspectives, where they can develop a network and their skills, all the while exploring and, in some cases, publishing new solutions to emerging and persisting issues at the interface of science, society, and policy. So, I mean, for example, SPE just delivered a few months ago a 4-part workshop in partnership with NSERC, which I'm very, very proud of, on EDI, bringing in perspectives from NSERC's Dimension staff, but also EDI practitioners and students all over Canada, because there really needs to be an inclusion of all of these voices as we move forward on this. And beyond even SPE and other organizations like that, I think CSPC itself is another great example of this. I don't think it's really controversial to say, and I see Meredith is in the audience, that even this conference wouldn't be what it is every year without the involvement of many immigrant and international women in science who volunteer their time to make it happen. So, you know, as great as all these initiatives are, the unfortunate reality of looking towards a career in science policy, or even policy generally, is that there's a lot of hidden knowledge that's especially difficult to access if you don't have the mentors, you don't have the resources, and the barriers start to multiply if you have more limited time to get engaged in activities outside of academic training. And if you have, you know, parental responsibilities, if you have really anything that comes outside of this that kind of gets in the way of getting these skills that will allow you to have access to these careers, it really creates and multiplies these barriers over time. And it's incumbent to those that have that level of access and benefited from those resources to make sure to elevate and open those opportunities to those who don't have that level of privilege. But more than that, there needs to be much clearer and more accessible resources to anyone who wants to build a career and contribute to the policies that make Canada a great place to live. And frankly, in no uncertain terms, the voices of immigrant and international women in STEM need to be present in those discussions that impact their futures. So there's still a lot of work that needs to get done on this.
Thank you, Sean. This is so true. And before I go to the next question, Lale and Senator, do you want to add anything on to this?
Are you going to ask me a question, or do
Yes,
I?
if you want to add anything before I ask your question, you're welcome to do so. And also, Lale, if
I think I'll wait for the final remarks.
Okay, perfect. So, Senator, the next question is for you then. So COVID-19 has particularly affected female scientists who have experienced a substantial decline in time devoted to research. In parallel, a recent study of Statistics Canada revealed that immigrants have been disproportionately impacted. This could lead to dramatic and irreversible damage in short and long term for immigrant women careers. Urgent actions and accommodation need to be implemented to reduce the gap created during these 2 years to not worsen existing disparities. From your experience, what is urgently required to address inequities associated to both gender and minorities, and how can politics work on an inclusive policy to ensure research quality?
Yeah, what an important question. Listening to Lale, it reminds me my times as a young PhD and with having my 2 daughters. And the playing field is not level, and it is very difficult. And when people ask me, how did you made it to where I am now? It's a great sacrifice, and always battling, always swimming against the current, always working extra more than my colleagues, than my male colleagues. Listening to Sean, I understand that now that I'm in another position, that I have the knowledge, that I have the experience, I have to do mentor, and I have to reveal and what are the gaps, and then how can we disappear this gap, and it's not easy. And COVID has come and make a hit on us, on women in STEM and immigrants, have a big hit. And so a lot of the things that we progress, now we are regress. And this is sad. So I know that there are lots of people discussing and debating and proposing solutions. You have the American Association of University Women that offer recommendations to policymakers like me, and so I read them and I try to be present as much as I can. And I thank you very much for organizing this meeting. So they wrote a report that is called Solving the Equation, two dots, the variables for women's success in engineering and computing. And so they propose that we need to improve representation through education programs, to research funding, and by ensuring that the government funded programs comply with ethnic, civil, immigrants, human rights, and laws. Ensure that institutions receive grant funding, provide diversity strategies and policies, that all the data regarding STEM study and workforce participation must be collected by the government and should be disaggregated by gender and race and should be published, and so should be put available to everybody that needs it. How to combat this pay gap that Lale was talking about. So, I've been in so different contexts of academics and see that there are sometimes union and there are union conventions. And so it is more difficult for men to come and negotiate their salary because we are all governed by a union convention, but it's not everywhere. And so the rules applies different, and whoever is stronger and have more power for negotiation will get better salaries. So unions, I think, should be a way of exploring. In Quebec, universities most of them have unions, and so I have used the unions many times for many reasons concerning double standards, and unions have always supported me in my complaints, in my grievances, and I must recognize that they have a play to role. But also, there are countries, you have Iceland, that introduced the first policy in the world that requires that companies and institutions with more than 25 employees, they have to pay equally men and women. And so this credential, it is so important. I am thinking about the health system, the public health system, and how we are now missing nurses, we are missing doctors, medical doctors, and how the school of doctors are very difficult to convince to accept credentials from doctors from other countries. Yet, we know, I have lived in France, I have lived in Italy, and I can assure that the quality of the doctors in Europe and in many other countries, take Cuba, for example. So why we block them? Why do we don't accept it when we are now thousands of people without doctors in the provinces, including me? Presently, I don't have a family doctor, and I won't have probably within the next year. And I'm somebody that is 60 years over. So, this is worrying for the society. So yes, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the need to reform our social safety nets and employment insurance regimes. And it also forces university to change the teaching methods. And it's unbelievable when you think that all the sectors, how they have evolved. Take informatics, take medicine, take some industries, and then we go to the academics, and we are still using the blackboards and the desk, and we haven't progressed as much. We thought that COVID, with this remote teaching, was going to force universities to come and be creative and create many new ways, but it didn't happen yet. Or we have then to ask and demand at all the levels. at the level of the student. I talked to association, to student association, and I said to them, ask, because you have to receive the same quality education that before COVID, we had before COVID. So the students have the power because they are the ones paying for their education. Then the teachers, we are there and we have our union, and we have to also complain, and then elect visionaries as our leaders, as the deans and the principals. And it's so easy and to see universities, the ones that develop and go ahead, it's because their leaders have visions, have lived in future generations, things in future generations, and they have co-construct and co-create, as you said, better futures. So I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Senator. We would have liked also to cover the private sector today, but unfortunately, our panelists could not join us today. So I would move to the final question, final remark for all our panelists. And so considering our conversation, we would like to end this panel with a final comment from you. We obviously see the emergence of EDI, and yet we consider that time is no more for talk, but for actions. As a final remark, how can we move forward? Can you give us some effective tools for a sustainable integration of immigrant women in science in short term? Sean, do you want to start?
Sure, I can start. Well, following to some extent from what Lale was discussing here as well, firstly, it's important to make sure that the voices of the folks that are going to be impacted by the policies that are being made are included in the discussions about these policies. And that includes institutionally, and that's in part what some of these EDI workshops that I was discussing before were about, in terms of bringing in some of the practitioners with students who are thinking actively about this, who are going to be the ones that are going to be affected by policies that are made over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. But at the same time, academic supervisors should make sure that their trainees are allocated the time, but also the supports necessary to build and to resource their own individual development plan. CIHR has provided a great template document for this. It's essentially a communication tool between mentors and trainees that needs to be revised, refined throughout training. And that should include ensuring that students have access to mentors outside the academia as well, so that they can get guidance on how to plan for careers in other sectors, and so that they can see themselves in different career paths. And if the skill sets and knowledge that a trainee needs to gain to develop their career requires engagement in other activities, we need to make sure they have the time and the space to do that. And there needs to be a clear recognition that that kind of activity is a valuable part of their training as part of the next generation of researchers in Canada. And to some extent, what's being done at the granting agencies, looking at research excellence, looking at how we can move forward on more responsible research assessment practices, moves towards that. And although I covered this a little bit right at the start, for the public sector, where possible, provide easier access to language training. It seems kind of a quaint thing to mention in light of all of these kind of grand issues, but having strong English and French is critically important for careers in the public sector. And having that accessible and giving people the space and the time to be able to do it without having this be a negative spot, taking away from their productivity in research or their productivity in other ways, is very important to allowing everybody to have access to careers later in life.
Thank you, Sean. Lale, do you want to follow up on this and give us your...
For sure. So I want to give a very big answer. So not directly which actions, but also maybe hopefully put a plug for my own program. So I see many major changes coming to us in the next decade. The first one is climate crisis. We really need to do something about climate crisis. And this is sort of so present in our mind with all the flooding that's going on in BC and the devastation there. The second one is AI. We are building the AI technology, and we are building a systems based on AI. But it is mostly, it is a specific group of people who are building this. And I don't think they are always thinking about EDI in that. And the third one is biotechnology. And biotechnology is going to change all of our bodies. So in the next decade, and how we live, and what do we mean by actually even living? And so in the next decade, our environment, our work, and our bodies will all be changing. What we really need to do is for immigrant women or any person from different groups of society to be successful is to not teach them specific actions or things to do, but to teach them how to deal with uncertainties, how to thrive them, how to understand systems, and how to design systems that are equitable, inclusive, and just. And so what I think is we need sort of these leadership systems for women, specifically women scientists and engineers who come from different points of view, because they bring in all these diverse points of view from all across the world to Canada. So we actually have a very good perspective on what can be done everywhere. And that helps us build a vision for the future. So that's the first thing, to give them this training possibilities in how to deal with these uncertainties that are coming our way. And the second one is, it is really, really hard to be a woman scientist, and even harder to be an immigrant woman in scientist, because we are so isolated. And with COVID, this got a lot worse. So I was thinking, when I had my children, and I'm living in a city and my mom is living thousands of kilometers away, and the only hope I had was my mom is in Canada and she can get a plane ticket and come here. But not every immigrant woman has this sort of, if something goes wrong, I have someone who can come to me, like, for my case was a few weeks, but, can at least be here to help me with something. And this is one of the biggest problems for people who are immigrant, who don't have that systems of support and structures that you have if you have lived somewhere your whole life. So what I think is we need to have the training, leadership training, and dealing with uncertainty, but also a support system for people. And this is one of the things my program called Wise Planet would help to build. And I hope if you want to have a look at it, please look at ucalgary.ca #wise-planet. So I'll put it in the chat. Sorry for putting this plug in, but it's not the only program. There's a lot of programs like this, but that's what we are doing. And this is one of the examples your organization is doing as well, to build that support system. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Lale. You really brought up very important points, and it really resonated with me as both a scientist and an immigrant woman in science. And I'm sure that other women will feel the same. Thank you so much. And Senator, I hope you can also add something, your point of view to the discussion as well.
I'll try. Listen, I think that every woman in STEM that succeed and is part of the 60% that are, or the 47% that are working in their field and that they are satisfied, it's a proof of resilience. So this is a person that passed through the whole testing, the whole exam, and finally got to the goal of being in science, having a work, and hopefully also having a family and be a mother, because this is a human being. Usually we forget, but it's a whole human person, and it's important, as I was saying before, about the vision of the leaders that are not only in the academics, but that are also in the industry or are that are in the financial system. And Me too, like Lale, I have a holistic vision where I call it the E to the fifth, which implicates education, employment, economy, environment, ethics. It's so important, ethics. And we have to connect the dots between all of these areas and sectors, because we are at the fourth industrial revolution. And if it's scientists don't start integrating the female perspective, the immigrant perspective, we are going to get down in competitiveness. We're going to lose in competitiveness, and so the more visions and perspective we have when we develop something, the better it is, the more efficient. Efficient was my other E, efficiency, because there is, or energy too, because connected to the environment, economy is the energy and is the efficiency. So we waste a lot in this present economic model, and women are the leaders now in the climate fight. Women, because we, as again, we are survivors, we are resilient, we know about this because we have passed through all these experiences, and hopefully society will make a room to hear us, and so to progress at the speed that we need to progress, because I just came back from COP26, and we are not progressing at the speed that we should. You know, we have to still be happy that 1.5 degrees higher than the before the first industrial revolution. It's alive. It's like we are, instead of pulling us by the top, we are everybody pulling by the bottom, and we are not being ambitious enough. So I understood in Glasgow that there were two COPs, one official inside, where the leaders, mostly men, mostly lawyers, mostly just politicians, were taking the big decisions, while outside there were a lot of scientists, a lot of people coming from all over Europe, um, making manifestations, demonstrations outside. And there is an Extinction Rebellion scientific branch. And I have signed with them and I follow them, because I know that scientists, we are not speaking as loud as we should, given the daring situation that we are living with, the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your answers and comments. And I think now we can move to the Q&A. And I hope the audience, if the audience want to ask any question, they will write in the chat. We have a first question. So a huge difficulty for AWS in getting a job is to fit into the so-called Canadian experience. What strategies should the organization use to be more inclusive and capitalize on the non-Canadian experience of highly skilled immigrants and integrate it in the Canadian job landscape? What AWS need to fit in the system? Who wants to start? Dale, Senator.
Yeah, I really don't know in terms of the strategies for the organizations, and the reason for that being that I've been in academia, and in academia we get most of our very good graduate students from the people who are applying from outside of Canada, and partly the reason is that people inside Canada get the jobs really easily, and there's a lot of investment in terms of money and time to go to the graduate school. But in terms of what we can do to prepare ourselves to go into the Canadian job market, one of the hardest thing I find is understanding culture and how it works. And this I see from people who come in and ask me for help. And it's a sort of like the understanding of how the job market works, and having the support for being able to do these things. The biggest thing I will tell everyone is that have a lot of confidence in yourself. When I first came to Canada, I just had looked at everybody else and said, oh my goodness, they knew so much more than me. And then when it came to performing, I would just have the answers much faster than everybody else, because I worked so much harder. And on like sort of trying to learn the things and stuff like that, because I always had this sort of I don't know this, what am I going to do? Am I going to be totally thrown out right now? And so I think having more confidence when you're at least in yourself would really help to get yourself prepared, but also seek those mentors who will spend the time and help you to get ready.
I think I would like to add that there are many ways of closing some gaps. The majority of the graduate students, and even in the practice, I'm an engineer. They hope that they will get these skills through the academic world and through standard procedures. But in reality, there are so many other ways. And we have to put emphasis on self-learning and networking and the self-actualization and also transversal skills. Emotional intelligence and developing relational skills. It is important. Communicating, it's very important. And so these are, well, they will call hard skills, soft skills, but all of them are very important in today's work. And we need this network because we live in an environment where we need references, and the only way of getting positive reference is by exchanging and interacting with our colleagues and with people that are senior, but also people that are younger. So I think that these social aspects of the STEM because usually STEM people is very introverted, no, and it's not like in the social science where it's really more open with everything. So and women in STEM, I think we have a big role to play in that area.
I'll add also from the policy side in general, there's still not even a concrete understanding of what even a Canadian PhD can bring to policy development. So, as I think this was one of the statistics from the survey, there's also a misunderstanding and a devaluation of international credentials as well. And that misunderstanding just kind of compounds the issues on this end, but also the metrics that are used to look at academic success can be very different in many different ways. One of which is there are many countries where there are lots of scholarships and fellowships that are available, lots of awards that are available for people to demonstrate their excellence. There's many countries in which that is not really the norm. So the way that we design programs that hire scientists into different sectors need to look not only at how Canadian trained scientists show their level of excellence and how they've developed as experts over time, but also look at how this is done internationally. Because really what what scientists can bring into different sectors and to advance on big issues like climate change, we need global perspectives on this, and we need to rely on people that come from everywhere to be able to contribute to this and to contribute to global problems. And if we don't have those people who are from various areas engaged in the process of designing or at least informing how some of these hiring practices are done, then we're not going to progress.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We receive another question in the chat. So it is a huge emotional and cultural challenge to relocate to a new country where you have no connection and take a toll on the mental health of the immigrants. In that case, when you only have your degrees and experience to support you, and your degrees do not hold the same value in your own country, it leads to anxiety and depression. Are there any programs to provide counseling to these new immigrants, both personal and professionally?
I can start.
Yes,
While I was the chair of my department, I had to face several sad experiences with graduate students coming from abroad, living alone by themselves, and being hit with depression. And it's really sad. And universities are not well equipped. They don't have enough people to, and now this problem is increased with COVID. I know now it's happening with COVID. It's getting worse. And I was thinking at that time why the faculty in psychology couldn't create a clinic like the one it is created for for the students in law, or the others that are the students in math that show statistics to the younger students. So why this was not possible? It seems that there are some ethical issues. But yes, this is very important, extremely important. And some, again, the relation and the fact that in STEAM, most of the people are introverted. I can recognize that. I do remember even myself being alone in McGill doing my PhD and feeling lonely and sad. And because I was just with my husband and nobody else from my family in Peru. But my co students from Latin America came, and we form a group, and we form a very tight group, and we still are friends almost 40 years after. And I think many times that they were my saving boat during this sad period. So when I have a student that comes and talks about this, it touches me very profoundly, and I don't have yet a complete answer because we need more resources, and it's difficult because of it's very personal. It can be ethical, and so we cannot just solve it in a very fast way.
Can I quickly add something? That there are lots of places now that help with mental health. Like I know there's places at the university right now in Calgary, like a distress. We also have a mental health strategy. But besides that, the biggest problem I have seen in mental health is the stigma. And it is not something that only happens to a few. Happens to most of the people who are immigrant, come from countries with a lot more sun and a lot better weather. And it is really hard to be homesick, cold, and have no money and no support. But remember, you are not alone. Most people have been through this, and don't think about that it is a bad thing to ask for help. Now we're going to stop there to see. Now we're sort of running out of time.
We had one more question, but I'm sorry I don't have time to ask the question. I just want to take this few more seconds remaining to thank you so much for joining us today and to bring up a very important point point to the discussion. I think there will be a lot of food for thoughts for the Immigrant and International Women in Science Network. Really, this was a very important discussion for us and especially for the future. I hope this will really help build a better strategy for women that look for new careers, hopes, lives in Canada and everywhere else in the world, actually. So thank you so much. Have a good night and evening, everybody. And
thank
see
you to you all. Thank
yes.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.